Good afternoon. We'll get started in just a few minutes here. Okay, it looks like we've got a good amount of people here today. I think we'll go ahead and start off. Good afternoon and welcome to Intersections, Equity, Environment in the City. My name is Marin. I'm a member of the WID Symposium Committee, and I'm here to welcome you to our final day of the symposium. What an incredible week it's been. We are on day 6 of this hybrid multi-day event that's taken place over the course of the last week. The content has been put together collaboratively with Women in Design, BosNOMA, and a ton of support from the BSA. Today, we will be hearing a panel discussion on equity and social justice in design and planning of public infrastructure. Unfortunately, the event we had scheduled for this afternoon, we've decided to cancel because of the weather. We will reschedule this through our WID Wednesday programming in the spring, so I hope you'll come back to join us for that. There's a happy hour in person at Canary Square from 5 to 7. We'd love to see all of your faces in person. And then for a few logistics, if you're looking to receive AIA credits, there will be a link provided in the chat about 10 minutes into the start of the session. If you have any questions for the panelists as they're speaking, you can drop them in the Q&A box. We'll potentially answer them in, sort of as we're going throughout the presentation. They'd really like this to be conversational, but if not, we'll make sure to have them answered by the end by the session moderator. Use the chat if you're having any issues during the session, and we also have the BSA host's phone number, Madeline Hike, so you can jot that down now in case you're having any technical issues. And with that, I'm delighted to introduce our panel. We have, I'd like to point out Margie Lackner is one of our Women in Design Award of Excellence winners this year. So if you were here on Monday afternoon, you got a little glimpse into her background. Excited to hear more about her work in this panel. She is the Deputy Chief of the QA/QC at MBTA. We have Jessica Kenny, Director of Environmental Services at MassDOT. Eddie Padmudi-Butro, Founding Principal at Urban Idea Lab, and Pavlavi Mondi. She'll be moderating this session. She's a Climate Resilience and Sustainability Design Lead, also at Urban Idea Lab. And from that, Eddie, I'll let you take it from here.
Slide, please. Do you want to put it on a slide view? Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. So as we all hoped, the infrastructure bill is now a reality. This has been a long time coming and needed. So the question for us now is simple. Are we going to rebuild our infrastructure the same way as before, or are we going to reimagine how to rebuild our infrastructure in a new way, in a more equitable and just way? I believe this is our time. We can all find a role in reimagining our future. We are in a unique period where changes can happen, and there's going to have funding to back it up. Next slides. When the highway bill was approved 65 years ago in 1956, it was a cutting-edge idea. Engineers were designing the future. As shown here, it was designed with pride. It was designed with the future in mind. Next. Perhaps most of you are too young to remember what became a reality. It is a highway in the sky, however, slashing our city, creating marginal neighborhoods. Many, many more cities around the country had similar fate as this one. Equity and social justice never entered into the equation. It was about capacity and speed in building these highways. Next. As a matter of fact, the focus was simply on building these projects. Swaths of lands were cleared with speed. In effect, the footprint of this project take on the path of least resistance. Therefore, most vulnerable neighborhoods, the one that had no voice, is the most impacted. Next. So you can see everywhere around the country, neighborhoods mostly of people of color were obliterated. These projects literally showed physical manifestation of environmental racism. As a result, neighborhoods were blighted and segregated, the economic impact incalculable. Next. Here in Boston, we were undoing the damaging impact of the highway. We explored what we can do about it. Yes, one might argue that we are talking about a wealthy downtown neighborhood area. However, we should not ignore the lessons learned from this project. It is a window of what is possible. Today, climate change is another layer that was never considered in the infrastructure project of the past. This is a reality now, and we cannot talk about environmental justice without talking about climate change. They are all tied together. We have to look at them in tandem. This is our big challenge. We are fortunate that the city has created a climate readiness plan. We need to look at this very closely, make sure that it will be considered and integrated into any future plan. Next. Number 4, resilient infrastructure is the focus of our following example. Next. Thank you. Okay. I want to use the Northern Avenue Bridge project as an example of an aspirational infrastructure project where climate change, the surrounding area, history, culture, stakeholder ideas were integral part of the design. The existing Northern Avenue Bridge was multimodal. It was a transportation connection. It was a movable bridge with vehicular traffic, rail, and pedestrian lane. This was, for a long time, a fixture in the Boston waterfront landscape that a lot of people love. Unfortunately, the impact of climate change basically destroyed this bridge. Storms, high tidal cycle, heavy rain regularly soak the bridge in salt water. It is now structurally damaged beyond repair. Yet, this is an opportunity to rethink on how we want to redo a project. This is one way where we can start to think about how to do it for the future. Next. So for this bridge, we strive to find a multidimensional solution. We had input extensively from stakeholder, residents, businesses, nonprofit organization, and the rest. It was at times very contentious. It was challenging, but in the end, it was exhilarating. We considered, among others, climate change, equity, history, culture, and connectivity. Looking at this map, we are looking at the larger context. It is clear that this bridge connects the established downtown area with the new, much developed South Boston neighborhood. So it was determined that this should not be about vehicular bridge. Rather, it should serve the pedestrian and bicycle user with public transit component. Next. Okay. It was, in the end, a people-first solution, creating a new place for people to cross the channel or to gather. The current pandemic exposes the inadequacy of open spaces in most urban areas. Hopefully, projects like these will start to alleviate the problem. Next. As you can see here, we have to raise the bridge quite high so that it does not have the impact from a sea rise in the future. We are also changing it from a movable bridge into more like a fixed bridge, so it can be a continuous connection from one neighborhood to the other. Next. This goes to show you about the whole area is really much more pedestrian oriented. Next. Yeah, I want to stop here for a little bit. So in here, we really think about inclusivity. So it's about accessibility. And this was a huge challenge because of all the different level changes, but we fought really hard so that every single space, every single nook and cranny can be accessible to everyone, regardless of physical disability. And also here you can see, we try to, what you call that, not recycle, reuse a lot of the elements that can be salvaged. So we use it as the column for the lights. We also kept the turning mechanism that is very special with glass floor so we can see it. So a lot of these things about just respecting history, reusing things that are important are all incorporated into this design. Next. Again, showing all the different access ramping system that we make it so that it doesn't feel like a ramp. It feels like it's much more integrated into the design. Next. Again, looking at the connection to one of the area. Okay, sorry, thank you. Stay here for a minute. So in here, it shows also that this bridge now will have the transit component as shown here with the MBTA bus, but mostly it's going to be a new special place that can be used for everyone by pedestrian and bicycle. It's a new open space that can be special for everybody. Next. So what are the takeaways? We have right now once in a lifetime opportunity. We need to seize the day. We are going to have the funding and the political will to reimagine our future. And let's face it, infrastructure project has never been sexier. Everyone should feel empowered to push for the right solutions. Thank you. Margie?
Hi, yep, just pushing the right buttons here. The MBTA is a large and complicated organization with a $2.5 billion annual budget. My group serves the Capital Programs Department, and my focus is on quality design and construction. I will use bus transit as the vehicle to explore today's topic. The MBTA's bus programs are very much about social and environmental justice, with accessibility critical to achieving equity. Use of public transportation must at least double if we are to meet climate change goals. As a recipient of federal funds, the MBTA must comply with the requirements of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Under Title VI, the Office of Civil Rights is responsible to ensure public transit providers comply with the laws and regulations that prevent discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, and age in the provision of services. ADA prohibits discrimination and ensures equal opportunity and access for persons with disabilities. The Federal Transit Administration works to ensure non-discriminatory transportation in support of its mission to enhance the social and economic quality of life for all Americans. Next slide. Changing both the perception and the reality of bus service from second class to first class service is critical to the future of transportation. Being from Pittsburgh, I talk to strangers. I enjoy seeing the same people and making friends in this neighborhood on wheels. What better way is there to share a ride with your friends and neighbors? Not only can buses run without fixed guideway, but routes can also be flexibly modified to better serve customers. These are images of the new Quincy bus facility. The MBTA plans to spend $4.5 billion to replace its 9 bus facilities at the rate of 1 every 2 to 3 years. All facilities are planned to meet LEED and Envision Gold. The MBTA plans to invest $100 million annually to convert to battery electric buses over several decades. Sea level rise and extreme weather is a major factor here. It requires consideration of critical infrastructure, elevation and drainage, and collaboration with host municipalities, as this is not a local problem. Improved bus service has the potential to address changing service needs for all communities. All facilities and vehicles will be accessible. You can go to the next one here, probably. Employees with disabilities will be able to approach, enter, communicate, and exit. Customers will be able to board vehicles, use stations, and enjoy accessible service. Next, when I moved from New York to Massachusetts, I wanted to live in Chelsea because it felt so much like my wonderfully gritty hometown, Pittsburgh. But I learned that Chelsea lacked public transportation. These are images of the Chelsea Gateway shelters and of the right-of-way. The project includes both commuter rail and Silver Line connections. The busway was a MassDOT project in which the MBTA collaborated. The commuter rail station is an MBTA project. It begins to address some of the transportation needs for environmental justice communities. Potential expansion to additional communities is under study. It provides intermodal connections and a backdoor to South Station from the north. Into the next. Universal design for accessibility benefits all who are differently abled and who use varied wheeled mobility devices, including baby carriages. It celebrates bus with memorable structures. It provides shelters and amenities, including real-time arrival information and maps, and uses durable materials and details to ensure future quality service. This is also a MassDOT project on which the MBTA collaborated. It resulted from the removal of the Casey overpass. Significant roadway configuration required complete reconfiguration of the original busway. This project is also all about respect. Respect for the existing architecture and respect for our customers. Challenges included building over 7 tracks below, working within a constrained budget, and making operations safe in a long, narrow configuration. It provides weather-protected intermodal connections. It serves multiple routes through environmental justice communities. The BPDA collaborated with the MBTA to support design quality through alternatives selection and community engagement. The selected design includes natural light in the shelter and strategic landscaping outside to protect adjacent residences from headlights. Additional accessibility improvements will be constructed by a project currently in planning. Columbus Avenue Better Bus program is a collaboration between the MBTA and the City of Boston. It is the first of a number of projects planned for several municipalities. These are images of the next one, shelters and bus lanes. The project required close collaboration between both design consultants and construction contractors for all parties. It provides improved trip time through use of dedicated center running lanes. Design quality focuses on consistent design through all neighborhoods, universal design in compliance with the terms of the Boston Center for Independent Living lawsuit settlement agreement, and durability through use of quality materials and finishes. Integration of digital screens allows us to respond more flexibly to customer feedback regarding the type and form of information customers find most helpful. Next slide. The MBTA is working on how to respond to changing service needs overall on an ongoing basis. Anonymized GPS data provides origin and destination needs. And this is not like where you get on and off a vehicle, but rather your real origin and final destination that allow it remapping of key bus routes and will allow other high volume routes to function more like key bus routes. A new network map is planned for early 2022. Improved signals for transit priority and queue jump are being incorporated wherever feasible and beneficial. Next slide. The COVID-19 emergency caused environmental and social justice challenges to emerge into undeniably clear view. The MBTA continues to sharpen its focus in providing non-discriminatory, accessible transportation in support of its mission to enhance the social and economic quality of life for all we serve. I want to offer everybody an invitation to consider working in the public sector. The work we do affects a broad population of all abilities and means, and we want and need the best and most talented workforce that is equally diverse in every way. I myself was reluctant to work in the public sector before I joined the MBTA. What I discovered as time passed is that there is great need and great opportunity to exercise creativity and deliver quality great satisfaction in serving one's community, and great pleasure in working with the brilliant, dedicated, and talented colleagues I have at the MBTA. Thank you.
Those were some great presentations. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jess Kenny. I'm the Director of Environmental Services at the Highway Division with MassDOT. And I do want to follow up to what Margie was telling us, as well as Etty. Infrastructure is sexy and we are hiring. So if you are interested in public service, I just want to encourage you to keep your eye on the postings. And if you have any questions, or you want to come work for the Highway Division, feel free to contact me. I'd love to share my experiences with you. So I'm gonna try to get through my slides quickly. They're a little bit text heavy, so I apologize for that. Today, what I wanna share with you is a little bit about our resiliency program that we are working on and establishing and building upon. I'm gonna highlight a few programs today. I really like to focus on interagency collaboration, the strategic resilience self-assessment that we're working on now, and just highlight some current initiatives. Next slide, please. So we are partnering with many state agencies, but with we're partnering with EEA. We are also on the RMAT team, which is the Interagency Committee to Implement and Monitor and Maintain the State Hazard Mitigation Plan. We have several representatives on the team. We have a meeting next week. We are tracking progress on resiliency and climate-related initiatives. We've also been sharing a lot of the data that we have for modeling and sea level rise information with EEA. Next slide, please. One program that I would I'm really proud of is run out of our Wetlands and Wildlife unit in the Environmental Services section. And it's the MassDOT Highway Division Fluvial Geomorphology program. So I always have trouble saying this. Tim Dexter of our group is our leader in this. And it's really the study of river processes and shapes. And it allows us to look at bridge reconstruction and rehabilitation in terms of what we're going to do for stream restoration and things like that. It's all available publicly, from what I understand now, on YouTube, and we can send out information for that. But the training has been for the last few years with over 300 participants. And we partnered with Federal Highway, MassDOT, and other agencies, as you can see. So one of the things I'm really excited to be able to share with you today is we are starting to do a strategic resilience self-assessment at the Highway Division. And we are using the Transportation Research Board's guide, which is a mainstreaming resilience concepts into transportation. It was published this past February. And I'm new to this position. I was hired in this role, about 8 months ago now. I've been at the Highway Division for almost 20 years, but this is a new role for me. So, that's very important to the chief engineer and the administrator to move forward on resilience and climate. And so when I saw this published, I was really excited. So we signed the task orders for it, and we're starting to develop the program and build out checklists and questionnaires. But the whole focus on it is really to have the ability to have a resilient transportation agency and to build a scorecard on where we are, so we can figure out where we need to go. Next slide, please. This is just some of the concepts. It's really the considerations should be part of all DOT functions. And also we should be partnering with various agencies, organizations, and communities, to really have a collaborative effort in all disciplines. And I think it's really important to partner with different communities. especially in terms of flooding and resilience. It affects all of us, we're all people. And like Eddie had said, we need to be people focused. So it's just really important. We have support at the highest levels. This is very important to the Highway Division as well as to MassDOT. So next. One of the other things, as I was starting to look at our resilience program and sustainability and climate, and this is just like I'm just touching on a few things, I realized how many great people at MassDOT were doing these great projects. And, we need kind of a clearinghouse to show all these great things. But so I wanted to just kind of bring some, points to this. So we are currently we have what's called level 2 charging stations, and they provide an average of 10 to 20 miles of driving. Level 1 provides about 5 to 10 miles of driving, and level 3, 40 to 50 miles. I'm still learning about this. We're building charging stations that are coming soon. The Whately Park and Ride is now operational. Coming soon are Bridgewater service plazas on Route 24, and we also have new charging stations at the New Bedford and Harwich Park and Rides coming, followed by the Greenfield Tourist Center RMV Park and Ride, and also at the Bourne Park and Ride. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing. We also have, we've been learning more about the Complete Streets funding. So I just have to get my notes. Okay. Complete Streets provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes: walking, biking, transit, and motorized vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. The Complete Streets funding program encourages communities to incorporate Complete Streets principles into regular planning and design practices. Began in 2016 after funding that was authorized in the Transportation Bond Bill, and it was reauthorized in the 2021 Transportation Bond Bill. It incentivizes municipal involvement with technical assistance and construction grants eligible to municipalities through a 3-tiered approach. Since 2016, the Complete Streets funding program has made 385 grants totaling $68.5 million, and we prioritize projects in EJ communities. Next slide, please. The shared streets prioritize a safe space for people walking, biking, by implementing low-speed streets or shared streets, new sidewalks, new protected bike lanes, new off-road trails, new bicycle parking, new crosswalks, traffic calming measures, and ADA compliant ramps. It was launched in the June of 2020. All municipalities and public transit authorities are eligible to apply. The grants are between $5,000 and $200,000. There are also better bus projects that provide new facilities for public buses, and they can receive up to $500,000. EJ communities, additional points are awarded to the projects situated in census blocks, which are in EJ communities. And we went past the application. I won't share all the application deadline information, so I apologize. Next slide, please. So the South Boston Silver Line, an existing emergency access ramp from the Hall Road to I-90 eastbound, is being modified to allow the use of buses during the PM peak hour. The bus use would be allowed between 3 and 7 p.m. If speeds on I-90 are less than 30 miles an hour. Another example, I think, is, so my slide's a little bit different. Completely, the HOC, which is the Highway Operations Center in South Boston, is certainly important to be resilient and have redundancy. So there's a completely redundant backup about half a mile away from the current center. Highway operations can be operated from either location individually or simultaneously, and there's a third redundant control center completed in Worcester, and it's being tested now, which will have all of the HOV capabilities. At all of these locations, the HOV systems themselves have redundant servers, and they're all powered by emergency generators as well as backup batteries in the event of the loss of power. Next slide, please. So here are some statistics on our solar program. My slides are not, here we go. These are some of the solar projects that you've seen, and yep, I'm sure you've driven by them on the highway. You can see how much power, and that we were able to get grants for them and what the savings are. So this is just another part of the Chief Engineer's Clean Energy Program. Next slide, please. This is really exciting. I'm not sure how many people have been out to see this or have heard about it. This is the new Central Mass Transportation Center. The contractor was awarded for $36 million in July 2017. It's now substantially complete. It's a 4-story, 78,000 steel frame building with a 3-bay garage for vehicles and maintenance. It's a net zero building. Once it's interconnected, the account will also have an accountability in the building to see if it's truly net zero. Next slide, please. Some of the environmental features, talk about those. 8 single port electric vehicle charging stations. The new administration building is state-of-the-art construction, utilizing air sources, heat pumps to provide heating and cooling, LED lighting, daylight harvesting, building automation systems, super insulated and airtight envelope design, triple glaze curtain walls and windows, solar shading devices, and canopies. The new facility was constructed on a hill with 3 sides of the building, partially or fully covered by rock and soil. The 4th side of the building is compromised with triple pane glass facing the sun and angled to maximize the amount of sunlight coming into the building. The building envelope and its positioning will assist in energy efficiency to ensure the structure retains heat or cold throughout the seasons, with the soil acting as a natural insulator. The building is designed to take advantage of natural daylighting in order to minimize the amount of artificial light required. Triple glazing reduces heat costs and increases temperature on the inside of the panes, improving thermal comfort and facilitating energy efficient climate control in the interior of the building. The Central Mass Transportation Building will generate all of the energy consumed on site using photovoltaic panels on the building and other energy efficient systems such as LED lighting, low flow plumbing, and highly efficient heating systems. MassDOT's participation in the SMART program will provide an additional $3.2 million in incentives over 20 years. And we will receive about a total of $4.1 million from National Grid point system, customer incentives, SMART program, and other grant programs. Next feature slide. This is our diesel retrofit program. And we only have one slide on this, but I wanted to just show that, what we did was we had off-road equipment over 50 horsepower with very few exceptions, large lift cranes and things like that were retrofitted in order to improve air quality. And so we just have some statistics here on that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was a lot of amazing stuff being done behind the scenes. So I'm glad that you could share a preview into that with us. Before I start my section, I just wanted to take a moment and thank BSA Women in Design. As you can see, we have an award winner with us. And we just are very, very grateful to have an opportunity to share our respective roles in the community of infrastructure design. So starting out, just a disclaimer that a lot of this work that I'm going to be sharing with you all today is what I did as part of the Charles River Watershed Association. That's why you see the Charles River on my screen. And I was involved in that for almost 15 years, serving as the Director of Watershed Resilience. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, we'll do that. So as we all made a note of, in terms of resilience, it's one piece to look at the environment as a whole, and how we are not only looking at improving conditions for most of our vulnerable communities, we also are very, very cognizant of how we've treated our natural resources over time. This won't come as a surprise to any of you, but with our tendency to pump and pave, we've actually caused a lot of degradation of our natural resources, specifically looking at impacts from urbanization. We've had issues with our rivers having really drop in their water quality. There've been issues with sediments, which in a lot of cases are contaminated because of the legacy pollutants that they've been carrying. Of course, we've been seeing a lot more floods and low flows in our neighborhoods and our rivers, and issues with groundwater. For those of you who are familiar with what has been happening in the Back Bay with levels of groundwater receding, there are some serious implications for compromised foundations. And of course, ecosystem and habitat, which has over time suffered. But we are a species that is finally trying to turn the ship and create strategies and considerations in how we redesign our infrastructure that will hopefully take us back in terms of having a lot more focus on both climate resilience, but also ecosystem benefits. So some of you might be familiar with this geography. I just illustrate this as a part of our work, looking at, how do you really think about climate resilience with regard to historic evolution of our neighborhoods and cities. As you can see in the two maps that are side by side, our historic section of this neighborhood of North Alston, Brighton, was primarily marshland, and there is no surprise when you compare it to the image on the right, which shows the expected and in some ways current inundation zones. So clearly the water is still trying to go where it was historically, and what we really need to do is improve our natural hydrology in our urbanized watershed to successfully adapt to what we are seeing in our future. These are just some glimpses of the issues that our communities have been facing for a while and continue to face, with a lot of flooding being seen, which is definitely impacting our current watershed and infrastructure in terms of compromising both the capacities as well as condition of our streets. But we also are looking at a huge rise in urban heat island effect that does get hugely maximized with a lot of impervious cover. So what you see in the gray is all the impervious cover that exists in this particular neighborhood. And if you compare it with what you see in green, which is the only remaining porous area that still gets the water into the ground to infiltrate. But for the majority of this neighborhood, we are seeing more and more issues with street flooding and drainage overflows, and every single instance of an intense rainfall we are seeing a lot more capacity building, which needs to be incorporated in our infrastructure. So the point I'm trying to make is this is happening today. Climate change is already here and very much thriving. Unless we can figure out a way to actually restore the way nature worked and the interface of our land and water worked in a more sustainable way, where you can look to increase the performative capacities of our landscapes and retrofit this large swath of impervious cover with plant and soil-based strategies, broadly called green infrastructure, in terms of our approaches moving forward. So what, in a sense, this approach that was termed to be blue cities looks at is taking our current impervious cover. This is obviously a combination of what we've seen in Boston and Cambridge and other municipalities like Somerville. And interestingly, watershed boundaries don't really care about municipal boundaries. The nature is kind of taking everything in its stride, and the watershed really needs to be focused as the unit for providing retrofits. So instead of having a much more urbanized landscape to deal with, we are changing the performative aspects of this landscape to have it function like what we are seeing in the historic landscape. The idea is not to sort of bulldoze our cities and convert it to tidal estuaries, but to replicate the performance of our cities to have the same natural hydrology that we used to in the past. So how do we do this? You know, it seems to be a daunting task, but in my experience, it really needs to happen, you know, site by site, you know, one piece at a time. This particular project is a school in Alston Brighton, which me and my team worked on to retrofit with green infrastructure. So a lot of what you see on the picture above is impervious cover that was essentially torn out and replaced with rain gardens, stormwater tree pits, and permeable pavers. And this was a demonstration project essentially for us to figure out how these strategies perform over time, but also a way to educate the different stakeholders who we brought on to help us implement this. Of course, it included a lot of the neighbors around the site who were willing and able to participate in planting, as well as educating their neighbors to make them more aware of what was going on and why we were looking to do this as a way to improve water quality in the Charles. Of course, I can't stress enough the importance of education. You know, this is not just our elementary school children, but we have a responsibility to educate, you know, communities in various age groups, but also various disciplines, because once we kind of make people understand the reason for doing these retrofits, I think it's just gives a way for the stewardship to be embraced by the communities themselves. If this public presentation is not, education is not a component of the project, it's very likely to fail. Of course, even going with completely, projects that are focused on planning and design and not really implementation. This is another way we have included communities, the residents along streets, to talk about what green streets are. How do you actually retrofit our existing streets, with green infrastructure, swales, bioretention areas, enhanced tree canopy cover. And we are hopeful that, this education only gets further amplified by neighbors kind of teaching their own neighbors about these initiatives. Of course, this is a project that was done for looking at the opportunity to provide porous alleys in Boston. This was our first project that Boston DPW partnered with us with different departments from transportation as well as Boston Water and Sewer to understand how different alleys in the city of Boston, and there are quite a few, can potentially be turned into porous alleys so as to have the water not just sheet flow as a polluted source for a water body, but get infiltrated into the ground and recharge our aquifers. So I talked a little bit about public education, but I think one of the opportunities that we really felt was making a lot more of an impact in communities was to train the youth that live in the communities, either in high school or perhaps waiting to go to college, and training them with actual technical skills that would make them into green ambassadors. So it's not just about, making projects happen in terms of implementation, but really training the next generation that understand why this work is important and how it can really help create a lot more resilience within their own communities. So this is just a really amazing way to have municipalities or the leaders, the politicians in communities really hear what the youth have to say about, advocating for their neighborhoods, advocating for improving their quality of life and the quality of the resource that they enjoy, as in this case being in Chelsea and areas like East Boston. And of course, I already talked about, the importance of taking stock of what matters to people. Not everybody cares about stormwater, but people do care about, improving their streets and improving their quality of life, having cleaner air to breathe and cleaner water to access. And so connecting this work back to where communities are, what are their priorities in terms of making their environments much more healthier. And that is the only way to make this work scale. So of course, having community pride in seeing projects that are designed and planned with their input, in actually having them be a part of the implementation, kind of gets us full circle into having an opportunity for these communities to then take ownership of these strategies. And once that change happens, then you know that it's going to be a successful stewardship effort. So as much as we've all talked about, having the responsibility of creating policies, planning, and design for our infrastructure, transportation, streets, sidewalks, highways, MBTA, transit lines. I think the key is to make that connect directly with the community's aspiration to have these infrastructure strategies work for them and fulfill their needs. These are just a few more examples of when I talk about green infrastructure, what I'm trying to convey is these strategies that use soil and vegetation-based techniques to make the stormwater infiltrate into the ground to recharge aquifers, but also have it filtered through soil and vegetation rather than having it go out to the creek unfiltered. So this is my last slide, again, talking about, while water nerds like me get really excited about implementing green infrastructure projects, in this particular community, we really saw a desire for the residents in this particular housing complex create their own community garden. People were still planting tomatoes and other crops in contaminated soils, and that was really one observation that made that project kind of shift focus and include sort of a way of addressing that particular environmental hazard and making sure that we could replace the soil and create actual community beds for the neighborhoods, residents, as well as their children to take ownership of the land and growing in terms of sustaining their own families with the produce. So with that, I want to bring this panel back to talking about the themes that we are all exploring in our different practices in terms of how we can further the agenda for equity, resilience, and bringing our services and our infrastructure to really meet the community where they are and bring them to a degree of resiliency that can be sustained. So with that, I'll open a discussion, and I see there are some questions, so I can just maybe start us off with a couple of questions that I thought might help us bring our different roles and different project focuses together. So I'll start us off just from a broader perspective by asking, we all saw the different ways or strategies the agencies are following, but what do you perceive as the challenges that still remain? Have there been instances where you have faced some constraints in terms of addressing equity and justice in the design and planning of public infrastructure? And if yes, how do you think we can overcome those challenges? Etty, do you want to start us off, or you're muted?
Yes, I can actually start. I feel like where I'm coming from, I'm the ones that's working in the trenches, and a lot of these things now has been laid bare, like how much we have to think about, how many challenges that we have to overcome, So I think the idea of working together, trying to figure out how to collaborate and how to make things more effective is where we want to go. And I think from all of us, we want to have that kind of platform where we can just like, you know, put our differences kind of aside, and how do we move forward more effectively? Because all these problems that is like hitting us, they're hitting us like big, strong, and fast. You know, we have no time to waste. Anyway, that's
Thank you.
my take.
Jessica or Margie, can you provide some perspective, being, you know, practice leaders in your respective agencies, in terms of what you might perceive as challenges that still need to be tackled, and how do you think, or what you might need from maybe other stakeholders or other sectors of society to be able to effectively address those challenges?
I can take second shot at answering from the MBTA's perspective, from delivery of capital projects. Our vulnerability studies are not yet complete, and we still have a lot of projects in planning. It's very, very difficult to address on a discrete basis at the project level. Even if we address it, you know, at, say, a station, we have to follow the track many miles through tunnels and varied terrain. You know, it's really a regional problem that requires collaboration with other agencies and municipalities. And obviously the solutions are very difficult and expensive. And to that end, Capital Delivery has created a high-level position focused on resilience and equity to help us to develop technical expertise in this area, because, you know, we've got to get the environmental issues together with the technical, you know, solutions, you know, for projects.
That's interesting. Yeah, sorry, not to cut you off. I'm sorry, you were saying something else.
Yeah, the other thing is that while we've made some progress on equity at the level of service and fares, again, Capital Delivery is trying to learn from these areas to better understand the impact of its projects, not only on our riders, but also on the neighbors, not only locally, but also more broadly. So again, you know, addressing these issues is really an extensive set of questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Jessica, one prompt that I kind of thought, looking at your presentation, you know, you mentioned working with EEA on the RMAT and other kind of tools that are really bringing all the different city agencies together to tackle the climate resilience issue. And I wonder, you know, I think in Massachusetts and Boston more specifically, we are at a great sort of time where the state has really, you know, provided investment from the municipal vulnerability program in getting all these issues around regional infrastructure and the potential of really keeping the climate resilience as the guiding factor. Could you talk a little bit more about, you know, how the MBT or the MassDOT, I'm sorry, is kind of maybe scaling this approach across, you know, I'm sure there are several thousand projects that DOT is going to be involved in and is currently working on. So could you talk to those?
I'd be happy to. You know, what we've seen in the past is we've been looking at things at the project level, which is good because we have great modeling, we have great hydraulic engineers, we reach out to communities. We've been doing that as part of our project development and design guide, and there's always room for more improvement. So we're getting information from people. We're also looking at, like I think I might have mentioned in the presentation, a resilience team we're right now kind of in the process of building that and working with our highway design group, the state hydraulic engineer, the state bridge engineer, the chief engineer, the administrator, and looking at what that looks like at a program level, because it really, it's almost overwhelming, you know, the amount of roadway, bridges, and other infrastructure. And, you know, and we're doing other things. We build, I mean, all kinds of things. We're partnering with DCR, we're building some of their projects and other state agencies as well. So we are reworking our highway design guidebook. You should see that published in a new format soon. And then we're actually going to be looking at the design standards. So we will be calling all of you and to partner with people, because I think it's all about the collaboration. You know, what's important, or what I think is important, is from my experience and from where I sit. And so it's about understanding the communities and working with our partners.
Can I add a couple of things?
Sure.
Number one, I think in terms of this collaboration, it's really good, but also even like begging you, I guess begging is the wrong word, but asking you to demand us to deliver, you know, equity, social justice, and resiliency, because we're ready to give it to you, but there's also have to be like the ask, right? Because a lot of these relationship is still about providing you the service. So I think we want to, there's a definite want to provide it, but also it would be helpful if there is a strong ask from the side of the public sector. And then the other thing, to expand what Margie is saying, is that one of the things that I think is really good is the fact that the MBTA is starting to really rethink about the bus system, the busway, because I think, Margie, that is creating a much more flexibility to quickly make sure there is equity in a lot of these marginal neighborhood who for the longest time doesn't have an adequate public transport system. And now by really focusing on the busway, it just have that flexibility to expand in a much faster way. So thank you.
I'm gonna look at our audience questions now, and I think the first one might be directed to you, Etty, but I'll just quickly read that. The Channel Bridge project is obviously an attractive design, but Etty, you acknowledge it yourself. It's extremely expensive in the gentrified part of Boston. You also said yourself communities had no say in the construction of the central artery. At this point, the communities around the old artery have no lack of voice. Why spend money in an area that already has plenty of resources for a small marginal benefit? Would those dollars be better spent asking communities in truly undeserved areas what they need? Yeah. Does building yet another feature in the heart of Boston only perpetuate the inequities we are trying to reverse? How does this example show Boston doing anything different than in the past beyond nods towards community engagement?
Okay, so this is a lot of questions that you're asking, but I'm glad it's brought up. Number one, let's just say that I think a lot of the things that was asked by Kevin is true, correct, but I think instead of thinking of it as instead of, we should thinking of it more as in addition to. And the central artery in the beginning, very beginning, was was without any community engagement and all of that stuff. But literally almost as soon as it was built, the powers that be realized that it was a mistake. And it almost like I work actually with engineers who were old enough to build it and continue to take it down. So it was in the same, project of taking it down. And that project was like a 30-year-long project. And there was a lot of community engagement at that point. Lots and lots of community engagement. And we're starting to think about mitigation. We're doing all of these things that should be more studied, because there were a lot of lessons learned, and I was working on it for 15 years. So, you know, a lot of these lessons learned is, you know, is something that now I'm trying to use to make the change for the future. So yes, a lot of the stuff that you're saying is correct, but I think it's also, we need to then move it forward and expand it to figure out how we deal with the surrounding community, how can we make it so that it's more inclusive and more equitable. I hope I answer your question.
I think you did. I could go to the next question now, and it seems to be just a specifically directed question towards biking. What is the envisioned role of bikes in the future of Boston? There are no bike lanes in the Columbus Ave plan, for instance. So I think this is something maybe all of you can address in your own sort of space of looking at infrastructure and how bikes are going to be a part of it moving
But
forward.
I think specifically he's talking, oh, he or she, I'm sorry, is talking about the Columbus Avenue busway, right, Margie?
Well, I can answer that question, and I can sort of tiptoe into a little bit further. On Columbus Avenue, right-of-way width was very restrictive. And in working with the community, there was a decision on the part of the city to not remove all of the street parking. In addition to that, and probably part of that decision is that the Southwest Corridor is very close by and has an excellent multi-use path. So that's sort of the answer for that specific project. As far as the role of bikes in the future of Boston, that's obviously a question for, you know, many parties. And I think that everybody knows that they need to have a big part. For the MBTA, we're obviously providing, you know, secure bike facilities, you know, at our stations. You know, those numbers are developed by the environmental department. And you know, we have shared bus and bike lanes, which the bus drivers hate, but they're getting used to it. They're just scared because they really don't want to hurt anybody. But yeah, obviously we need a lot more. I mean, I would love to be able to bike to work, but I've got a little bit of safe bike and then a little bit of really dangerous bike and a little more safe, a little really dangerous. And, you know, we've got to make it all safe if we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I did want to talk a little bit about, you know, getting all our municipal partners sort of to agree on these initiatives, because it's hard when, you know, the infrastructure is crossing jurisdictional boundaries and you basically have to bring everybody into the room to kind of advocate for prioritizing bikes and pedestrians. The last question, I think probably Jessica, you already, oh no, you answered some of the questions. So the last question that I see talks about digital signs, which are great in busways and very important. No, I'm sorry, then it's Margie's. Will MBTA install them where feasible in non-busway locations?
I'm going to say yes. We are starting to roll this out. Initially, digital signs were being installed purely for the purpose of developing revenue. And then a certain percentage of the time was given over to, you know, the MBTA's own purposes. The current program now is to have digital signs that are for customer purposes, you know, customer and MBTA purposes only. They are being installed in a lot of the transit stations. We've been working with a group at the MBTA called OneSource, as well as customer technology to do that. So it is something, it's a growing initiative, and we don't know where it's going to land, but we're making progress.
Thank you. I see
I
one
actually
other.
have a question, and I
Sure.
know that you ask all the question, Pallavi. So I have a question
You're gonna
for you.
put me in a hot spot. Go for it, Eddie.
So a lot of the stuff that you were showing and explaining was really, really interesting, and it's enlightening. And I do agree that water has no, does not follow any municipal boundary or agency boundary or all that stuff. So given that, what do you think should the strategy be moving forward? How does that mean in terms of like engaging with MassDOT, engaging with MBTA, in terms of just overall water management?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Etty. So I would say, as part of a watershed association, the vehicle that I would say the organization has is to have all 35 municipalities in the Charles watershed be a part of what is called as the Charles River Compact. And that's really a framework that was put in place more recently after the state started providing money for municipal vulnerability preparedness program. And that really, in my view, was something that kickstarted, municipalities wanting to collaborate on regional infrastructure projects. And of course, with MBTA and MassDOT, they're sort of directly connected with any regional project because they're likely the agency that owns it. So, a lot of the work that Jessica was talking about in terms of shared streets and, the river and culvert program have been really successful because I think, for communities to kind of have that opportunity to collaborate with their neighbors to bring infrastructure dollars directly from the state and having programs from MassDOT to kind of supplement that investment has really been effective as a way to incorporate climate resiliency in a much more direct way. And I'd say, the Mystic River Collaborative, which has also been a really effective organization that has brought all the Mystic communities together to talk about, how the Lower Mystic can respond to not only, water quality and flooding issues, but really looking at social resiliency and, actively seeking community input on, how people understand social resiliency, what the issues are currently that are impacting that. And I think it's really got us a lot more into the realm of social infrastructure and equity rather than just talking about, the technical aspects of incorporating climate change into our infrastructure projects. So I'll take a second because I just realized that we have another question in the chat, actually from Yanel. Are the best projects those where there is community commitment and buy-in, or is some of the work just the right thing to do and connecting with community is so critical? Really interesting. I don't know if you want to take a stab at it. I think we can all give our response to this one.
Sorry, Pallavi, did you direct that towards me?
I think it's open to anybody to tackle because it's essentially talking about, how do we define as what do we consider as best projects if we are looking at community commitment and buy-in for the project, or is it just something that each of our roles or the agencies that we represent consider as the right thing to do?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I guess we have such a wide array of projects at MassDOT Highway that, you know, it'd be hard for me to pick one, but I mean, some of the best projects that I've worked on are where, you know, we've had to sit down at the table with a lot of people that don't agree. A lot of people don't agree with each other, and have had different experiences. And I think the magic kind of comes in with public services when everybody calms down and you can talk and you really come up with a better solution. So that's what inspires me to come to work every day, is to learn and to collaborate and to help solve problems with people. That's all.
I completely agree with you, Jessica. And I have to say, it's really scary because it's many times it's very contentious, yet going through it makes you think of things that you might have thought before. It's like pushing the boundaries all the time. And I think in the end, like the people first idea for Northern Avenue Bridge, we did not come up with that. It was through a lot of community meetings, a lot of like intense discussion that we finally thought, you know, that no, the community, the stakeholders finally said, you know, it has to be a people first bridge. And then we just like, aha, and kind of wrap ourselves around that. So yeah, I totally super agree with you.
I guess I can add something to that, which is, you know, I think that everything is always a balance because, you know, for example, what should be a project to start with? And some, you know, broad perspective is required to do that. And, you know, the MBTA is really working very hard to do more planning as opposed to being, you know, reactive to political requests. So that always has to be balanced. And then, you know, working with community is always very humbling. And there will always be, you know, disagreements. But again, one has to put these things into balance. And in the long run, I think that there cannot be a good project unless there is a good client.
Yeah.
I think that's terribly important. And part of being a good client is listening to people and evaluating the input and then doing your honest and most open best on the project itself and having the right team.
Hear, hear. Good question, you know.
Yeah.
I also wanted to kind of, you know, since we are speaking to the design community and we kind of belong to it as well, I think in my experience, you know, the time we kind of make the transition from not being, you know, not owning our baby, our own design, and actually sort of handing over the sort of deliverable to the community and having them kind of shape it in a way that kind of meets their needs. I think from that perspective, I have realized, you know, humility goes a long way. You know, just as you said, Etty, you know, the community said, we want people first. And you're like, that's great. I'm going to have to, you know, just completely think from their perspective and, you know, make this project what would, in a much more explicit way, address the issues that we are trying to solve for our municipalities and our state more broadly.
I think it also helped to have thick skin and not take anything personally because, you know, and only through all of that we can, I think, listen carefully, because otherwise, you know, just Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, tear the idea apart and rebuild it.
We're almost at time. I just wanted to give a couple of minutes to any of you if you want to sort of talk about your one wish. If you had that in terms of incorporating these opportunities, I would call them, in your projects from this point on. I think if each of you could take a minute to tell us what would that one thing be that you'd like to either change or kind of reinforce or expand, or maybe get rid of.
I actually know exactly what my one wish is. From this presentation, from this experience, my one wish would be like, hopefully we have empowered and inspire more people to just take action and be active, because we can make a change, but we have to do it together.
Can I take a second, because I just noticed another question pop in, and it's from Anne Marie, and I have to just take it because it's an amazing question. So she says, you made a compelling case for the value of design in infrastructure and opportunities for designers in the public sector. What pathways are there for emerging designers who are interested in this practice to explore, both in a professional and a volunteer setting? So maybe one of you, Jessica or Margie, can take this as part of your response.
Wow. There are so many, the MBTA does not do its own design. So, my most powerful way to help in these things is to insist that there be properly qualified professionals on teams, that there be architects, infrastructure architects, urban designers on teams, that usually want to have the structural engineers or civil engineers take all of the scope of the project. I guess make noise. Make noise, let us know you're there. So that we can let others that need to know that you're there. We have internships, but we do not actually do the design.
Yeah, and most of our projects are designed by consultants also. So I agree with Margie. But I would also say network. Whenever the pandemic is fully over, get out there, talk to people. That's my goal in this position, is to start talking to people and find out what they do. And the more I learn about that, we want to see you guys on our consultant teams. So.
That's an
I want to add something.
I have to record that.
I'm sorry, I do want to add something.
Sure. Go for it.
And number one, I think this is a really great question to have a whole webinar in itself.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to stress is that the path that I took, the path that Pallavi took, and Jessica and Margie, they're not traditional architecture. They are a non-traditional path for engineers as well. So I think many misconception is that if you don't do design building, this non-traditional path is not creative, is not exciting, is not whatever. And I think how wrong that is, because we do need people who are extremely creative, who are good designers, who are, all these talent to be also doing this non-traditional path. Thank you.
Completely. And I want to say, just adding on to that, it's not about maybe designing the deliverables, but I have to, give kudos to our public agency, practitioners, because you've clearly managed to design a way to work with a system. And I think that requires a lot of creativity and persistence. So hopefully we can have more of our younger designers think about public service, and we have role models like Margie and Jessica to offer mentorship. So I would encourage any of our young designers to kind of take them up on that. And with that, I can bring this to a close. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, organizer, BSA and
Yes.
NOMA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marion.
Thank you all. This was wonderful.
Bye. See you
Thank you,
tonight.
Marion, for
Bye.
starting us off. See you guys. Bye-bye.
The ability to pursue a life of liberty in the pursuit of happiness.
Equity represents getting what we, as a person, as a group, as a society, need to survive and succeed.
It's also important to put a lens on our own professions and our own roles.
In spite of all my best intentions, I nevertheless, as a white architect, come from a position of white privilege.